Today we'll be reading The Tale of Freedon Nadd from the Tales of the Jedi Companion by George R. Strayton. The Jedi who fall are the most dangerous of all. Line from a children's rhyme. 400 years ago, there came a Jedi with unequaled enthusiasm and dedication. A young man who saw himself taking a place alongside the greatest of the Force's disciples. His eyes gleamed with love for the galaxy, for existence itself, and sparkled with his great hope for universal harmony. Jedi Masters could only marvel at his openness, at his willingness to trust and believe, and to give himself fully to the Force. His instructors all agreed that he would become a Master sooner than any Jedi before him, in spirit at least, if not in technique. Freedon's first test came without his knowledge, in a form he never would have guessed. When the time had arrived to bestow the title of full-fledged Jedi Knight on the apprentices, the Jedi Masters bypassed him. In that moment, the entire galaxy collapsed around him, and he felt as if a black hole had suddenly opened in his chest. Disappointment settled upon him, followed quickly by despair and hurt. He couldn't understand why the Jedi Masters had refused to reward him for all that he had done, for all that he had learned during his time on Ossus. No one had ever hinted at the possibility of his not becoming a Jedi Knight. In fact, all the instructors and all the other apprentices had commented on his proficiency and his ability to assimilate the lore and techniques presented to him. The Jedi Master's outright denial of his ascension raised a tremendous conflict within Nadd. In one respect, his instructors praised him, and yet in the other, they berated him. He tried to investigate the conundrum, tried to trace the individual strands of the knot these two incongruous messages had woven, but no matter how he looked at it, nothing made sense. His confusion led him to an ancient Jedi Master named Mata Tremaine, a human woman from Koroth who spent most of her time practicing lightsaber cadences on the outskirts of Ossus. Though she had spoken little to him, he sensed in her a serenity that allowed her to view the universe in its true form rather than in the shaded perceptions that most others saw. Even as he approached her, she continued to execute the cadence's moves with perfection, the thrumming blade making not a single extraneous movement. He stood at the edge of the garden in which she was practicing, waiting somewhat impatiently for her to address him in some manner. After a half-hour of silence, interrupted only by the saber's fuzz warble, Freedon could no longer keep his thoughts tethered in his mind, and they all seemed to explode out in one long string of sentence fragments, tempered by his feelings of abandonment and anger. Mata sliced downward in a precise arc, pivoted backward, and jabbed straight out toward Freedon, stopping the lethal blade of energy scant centimeters from the young apprentice's chest. While Freedon stared in amazement and confusion, Mata resumed the cadence, gliding into the next movement, as if she hadn't even noticed him. Frustrated with Mata, and with all the Jedi Masters for that matter, Freedon turned and stormed off toward the wildlands surrounding the city. "Freedon," came a withered voice from behind him. He stopped and slowly turned around. Mata stood with her lightsaber held before her. With a flick of her finger, the bright blade fell back into its hilt. "Some things cannot be taught directly," she said, taking several steps toward him. "Some things you must find in yourself. If we were to show it to you, to point to it and say, 'Look, here it is,' you would not understand it. Jedi must be willing to look into their own hearts and spirits. If you do not, well, let us just say that you will never become a true Jedi."
"Master Tremaine, please. I do want to be a Jedi, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I just need you to point me in the right direction. If you'll just..."
"I cannot."
"Why? Why won't you help me? I'm not asking you to hand everything to me. Just tell me what it is that's stopping me from becoming a Jedi Knight."
"I cannot," she said, her face and stance both devoid of emotion. A lance of rage suddenly stole into his heart, found a stable purchase, and then pulled in all the anger and hurt he was feeling, focusing it in a single lump of emotion.
"Secrets," he shouted as he stepped toward Matta. "You, all of you, hide behind these secrets. You don't want us to learn them. No, that would take away your power, your place in the Force."
As he came toward her, his anger spilled into the rest of his body, coursing through his veins in powerful pulses.
"I am a Jedi. It doesn't matter what you say. I don't need your permission."
Matta remained silent and made not a move as she watched him approach.
"You say you cannot answer me, but isn't it that you won't answer? You," he said, his words entwined with revulsion. "You spin this web of babble about nothing, and you expect us to chase after it like fools. Well, I won't. And none of you can handle that. I will become the greatest Jedi who ever lived, with or without your help."
To Freedon's startlement, Matta's eyes tensed just slightly.
"Prove it to me," she said, her saber flashing to life with a thrum of static.
Freedon stopped.
"What? I don't..."
Matta stirred the air with the blade of light.
"I say that you are no Jedi. Prove to me that you are." "You think you can scare me away, is that it?" he said. "But I won't run away like the others. No, I know I am the stronger. You can't defeat me with your malignant will."
He detached the lightsaber from his belt and ignited it, mirroring her slow, rotating movement. He wasn't going to let her win. That would prove that she was right, that he would never become a Jedi. All of his life, that was all he had ever wanted, and he wouldn't let her or any so-called Jedi Master take it away. He lunged forward. Matta countered, throwing his blade off. With an almost imperceptible movement, she thrust her saber at the right side of his ribcage, just beneath his arm. It took all the strength Freedon possessed to stop his own lightsaber's course, and bring it back to knock away Matta's precise attack. They traded several more assaults and parries, and Freedon had to struggle just to deflect Matta's dancing blade. And then there it was, a slight miscalculation on Matta's part that left an opening Freedon could exploit. For all of her arrogance, her sureness of her own ability, she, a Jedi Master, had made a mistake. Now Freedon could teach her and the other Jedi a lesson. He swung his lightsaber in a wide arc at Matta's shoulder. She looked up just as the saber came around, but she ignored it and instead gazed into Freedon's eyes. As his blade swooped down, he saw something in Matta's stare, an expression of calmness and acceptance, underlined by a strength Freedon had never noticed before. Suddenly, he knew that he had failed, that Matta had offered him a true test, and that he had chosen to see it as a threat. Desperately, he tried to stop the falling saber, tried to angle it away from her, but it was too late. As the blade of light struck Matta's shoulder and arced down and across, her robes collapsed to the floor, suddenly bereft of the body that had held them up a moment before. Freedon stared at the lifeless cloth lying before him, berating himself for his own arrogance. But the more he thought about the whole situation, the more he realized that Matta had brought her death upon herself. She didn't have to do what she did to prove her point. She was the arrogant one. She was responsible for the pain he was feeling, and yet she was not around now to help him with it. She was the one who had taken the easy path, and she was a Jedi Master. How could they refuse to make him a Jedi Knight when the Jedi Masters were weaker than he was? In a rage that clouded his thoughts and directed all of his emotions into anger, he fled from Ossus. Plans of retribution for what the Jedi had done to him emerged from the blackest places of his soul, feeding his anger and providing him with focus. As his world crashed down around him, he clung to his thoughts of revenge. One day, he knew, he would destroy those who had sought to destroy him. But he needed to learn more about the Force, needed to possess more power than the Jedi. From all of his studies, he knew of only one source that would readily accept his apprenticeship and teach him to wield the Force with impunity: the Sith. As Ossus disappeared into a tiny pinpoint below him, he set course for Ashis Ree, an ancient system deep in the dark heart of what had once been the Sith Empire. He would return, he knew. He only needed time to become the greatest Sith sorcerer that had ever existed, and then he would return to take his revenge on the Jedi. I hope you've enjoyed this reading of The Tale of Freedon Nadd.